This is obviously a prophecy, and Daniel was amazed by the words given by God. And I just found it funny. I was listening to a podcast, and this podcast made the claim that 75% of Americans read horoscopes at least once per month. 51% of those people think that horoscopes are true. And I just find that funny that humans, whether these people believe in God or not, they want to see the future. They want to understand what's going to happen in their lives through some form of prophecy. But we're very lucky because we get to see a prophecy, and we're going to see this prophecy fulfilled tonight. We're going to look at this through the lens of Daniel. Now, he didn't understand it, but we are lucky because we live in the future age where this has already been fulfilled. So we'll be talking about Daniel chapter 8. And I was asked to do this talk on why I believe the Bible a little while ago. It was in Melbourne, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I chose Daniel chapter 8 as my topic because to me, this is one of the best prophecies in all of the Bible, and it's so great because it is pinpoint accurate. It is 100% millimeter accurate. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Israel. So we see the Jews, they're caught up in Babylon. Things are pretty tricky. Jerusalem has been destroyed, the temple abolished. You've got starvation, you could potentially say slavery. They're in Babylon. Things are pretty tricky. And God says through his prophet Ezekiel, it's okay, you're going to come home. I'll read to you this quote. But you, O mountains of Israel, shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel. They will soon come home. Imagine hearing that when your land has been obliterated. Things are not good. Your people are depressed. They're losing their faith in God. And God raises up a prophet in Babylon and says, you're going to come home. We see the next part of this prophecy in Ezekiel 37, verse 12, and God aligns his nation like dead men walking. He says in Ezekiel 37, verse 12, therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says Yahweh, behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come from your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. So in other words, you're going to come back into the land. And this is the physical fulfillment of this prophecy, not the spiritual fulfillment. We hope that time comes soon. But we know exactly what this is pointing towards. This is 1948, where the Israelites, or the Jews, would come back into the land of Israel. And God said they're like dead men walking, but they're starting to get a little bit of flesh on their bones, and they're starting to stand up, and they're going to walk back, and eventually, we hope, coming soon, they're going to convert back to the ways of the one true God, back to the ways of Jesus. But at this point, it's just the spirit or the physical fulfillment of this prophecy. And on the 14th of May 1948, as the British mandate ended, the leader of the Jewish community declared the independence of the state of Israel. And this was amazing because no one thought that was going to happen. There was a little bit of land given back to the Jews, and they were given quite a bit of land, but not all of it. So that's the 1948 prophecy, or the Ezekiel 36-37. However, you'll see here through this picture, sorry, you might need to squint your eyes a bit, it's a little bit small. They were given plenty of land, and you can see the sort of whatever colour that is, the grey-blue colour. That's where the land Israel was given to occupy. But if you notice here, still a lot of Arab influence in the land of Israel. Jerusalem under control of the Arabs. And in comes Daniel. And Daniel's going to describe to us Israel retaking the land. And I think this is one of the best prophecies ever. 2,400 years ago, this prophecy was given to Daniel. And in Daniel chapter 8, Daniel sees a vision of a ram with 2 horns, symbolizing the Medo-Persian Empire. So we've got our ram here, and we're very lucky because the Bible spells everything out for us in this chapter. We don't really need to dig too far. Most of it has been given to us. So we've got the Medo-Persian Empire there with the ram and a goat with 1 large horn. So there's our goat, that represents Greece, and we've got a horn representing somebody. We don't know who it is just yet, but we'll get there in a moment. And the goat swiftly defeats the ram, and its horn breaks, and 4 smaller horns appear, symbolizing the division of the Grecian Empire. So we'll just dissect what's going on here. And as a reminder, have Israel in your mind the whole time, and then the rest of the chapter makes so much sense. We've got Daniel 8, verse 20, and this is said to be Media and Persia. That's the empire. And then, of course, in Daniel chapter 8, verse 21, it says, "And the male goat is the kingdom of grace. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king." So we're going to figure out in a moment who this first king is. And we're not going to use Google, because that would be cheating, but we've got the answer given to us in this very chapter. Brief recap, okay? This is exactly the same illustration given to us in 2 prior chapters, Daniel chapter 2 and then Daniel chapter 7. So if we go back and use a bit of a recap, we've got Daniel chapter 2. This is Nebuchadnezzar's image, and it's exactly the same as Daniel 8. It's still the ram and the goat. It's still the Medes versing the Greeks. So we've got Nebuchadnezzar here as the head of gold, obviously, the year 603, and that transponds once they got taken down by the Medes and the Persians in the year 539, and that, of course, is the chest and the arms. So we've got on the right-hand side, we've got the Persians, bigger arm, as you can see there, and a slightly less big arm on the left-hand side. So one group was stronger than the other. The Persians were stronger than the Medes, and they joined forces to become a pretty strong empire for lasting quite a long time. And then, of course, we've got Greece right here, the belly and thighs of bronze. Okay, so that is Daniel chapter 2 in a nutshell, but that is typically how man sees the kingdoms of man. Okay, man sees the kingdoms of man as this big, strong, warrior-like statue. And if you think about the modern day people today, when they die, typically what happens is they're given a statue put in their place. And I just had a quick look at some of the more big names out there. You've got the Statue of Liberty. You've got sports players. When they retire, they get given a statue. If they're good enough, you've got Mount Rushmore. You've got the Lincoln Memorial. You've got Walt Disney in Disneyland. I was lucky enough to see that last week. You've got all these big, strong characters, and that is exactly how man sees the kingdoms of man. Whereas in Daniel chapter 7, things change a bit. It's once again the same continuum, it's the same situation, but it's from a different perspective. And we're going to see how God sees the Medo-Persian Empire as a beast. It's ugly, it's not cute, it's gross. And that's how God sees the kingdoms of man. In the garden, man was told to have dominion over the beasts. But it seems to me like these beasts have become man in the eyes of God. And they're fleshly and they're gross. And this, of course, is Daniel chapter 7. We've got our bear there, and it's stronger on the Persian side. It's got 3 ribs in its mouth, and it's gross, and it's fierce, and it's strong. But the beast that comes after that in Daniel chapter 7 is the Greek Empire. And I think, I'm going to quote Brother Marty, I think you did the talk a few weeks ago. Brother Marty said something like, the leopard is the fastest accelerating animal of all time. It's faster than the cheetah. And I Googled that, and apparently that is true. And it can actually maneuver faster than the cheetah as well. But here we've got this Greek Empire with the 4 leaders, and it's got wings. It's quick. It accelerated really, really fast, and it took out its competition quicker than what you would think. But Daniel 8 is now different. It's not from the perspective of God. It's not from the perspective of man. But Daniel 8, we get to see another recount of the image, but this time it's from the perspective of Israel. In slides Israel, and it is focused on them. And if you read through the narrative, you'll see it's true, and we'll be talking about that moment on. But nevertheless, there was a question, and it was saying, who is this king? I'll just go back a few, sorry. Here we go, verse 21. And that male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So we're not going to cheat by using Google. We've actually got the answer given to us in verse 8. And this is the horn. This is not the animal, this is the horn of the animal in verse 8. It says, "Therefore the male goat grew very great. But when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven." So I was really glad to see Caleb Wern walk in the door this evening. I always go to him for the answer. Caleb, who's this great king that this is talking about? It is Alexander the Great. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Thank you, Caleb. But this is true. This is Alexander the Great, and he becomes very great. Not just a little bit great, but dominant and great. And you can't make this stuff up. It's incredible, isn't it? This prediction during the Persian Empire. Daniel 8 was written around 550 BCE, somewhere around that time period. Alexander on the throne around 200 plus years later. That's a prophecy in itself. If I just sort of stood down and we left the class there, that would still be pretty amazing. But there's a prediction about a man who's going to be very great, and many years later, there is a man who came onto this earth who was very great and destroyed the Medo-Persian Empire swiftly, just like a leopard does. So we're going to actually dissect this situation here, and it takes about 20 minutes to set up, but I promise you the end result of this battle is worth it. It is an incredible prophecy. How long is this vision going to be? How long is it going to last from? From the first battle of the ram and the goat until the time that Jerusalem is restored to the Jews. So Daniel is by himself, and he hears an angelic voice. And I'll just read it to you. It says, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, 'How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?'" How long? So that's what Daniel is hearing in his ears from an angel. And the question is, how long? Well, what's the question really asking? What is this verse 13, saying? How long will the vision be where there's no daily sacrifices, where the transgression of desolation is there, where there's no sanctuary? What's this really saying? Ultimately, it's saying, how long will Jerusalem be unoccupied by the Jews? How long is it going to be under Arab control? And we know that to be true because it uses the word sanctuary. And there's about 10 verses that underpin this. But Psalm 76 verse 2 is just one of the ones that I chose. And that says, "In Jerusalem is his sanctuary, and his dwelling place is with Zion." So how long will Jerusalem be trodden underfoot? How long will the daily sacrifices not be in Jerusalem? How long is the temple going to be unoccupied? How long will Jerusalem not be under the control of the Jews? How long? And that's the question that is posed. How long? And we find out in a few verses later in verse 14. And this is where things start to get quite amazing. You'll see verse 14 says, "And he said to me, for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state." We've got to ask yourself the question, what is the rightful state? Under the control of the Jews, those who fear God. And that is the big point being made here. How long? Now you'll see here in verse 14, it says, for 2,300 days. Now you might have heard before the day for the year principle, where sometimes with God, not all the times, but sometimes God uses a day that represents a year. And I think he does that because the Bible also goes on to say it is the glory of a king to search out a matter. It gives us the ability to search out things, to dig deeper. It's almost as if it's shielded from those that don't want to learn about God. You can read a verse once, glance over it, and it means nothing to you. But if you ponder it and you think deeply about it, sometimes we come up with the answer from the help of God. And of course, I believe the day for the year principle sort of works with that principle. Can anyone give me some day for the year principles that are used in the scriptures? Does anyone know any? Yep. Do you want to read that out? Perfect. That's the first one I had as well. Good. Anyone else? Any other day for the year principles? Not sure. There's about 5 or 6 of them. Yes. That was the second one I had. You guys are reading my notes. Excellent. Yep, good. Any others? I'm happy to leave it there. Two's pretty good. It is Ezekiel 4 verse 5 to 6. I'll read it out for you. Paul, it says, "For I have laid on you the years of their iniquity according to the numbers of the days, 390 days. So you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Israel, and when you have completed them, lie again on your side. Then you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah. 40 days I have laid on you, a day for each year." So that is Ezekiel 4 verses 5 to 6. So that's a pretty good one. There's plenty of them in the Bible. As I said, there's probably about 5 or 6. But nevertheless, God here is using the day for the year principle because, let's be honest, 2,300 days is really not that longer time period, whereas 2,300 years leads us quite a long time into the future. So we know that this is the day for the year principle. And as I said before, God does this to help us dig deeper, to want to learn about his word more and more and more. Okay, so we need to figure out now, right, it's good that we know 2,300 years, but we've got no starting point. At the minute, it's all, doesn't really make sense. We have to figure out, brothers and sisters, when did the goat and the ram, no, other way around, the goat and the ram, when did they butt heads for the first time? When did they fight each other? When did Alexander the Great take on the Medo-Persian Empire for the first time? Well, this one you can use Google if you want. The year 300... Oh, does anyone know that answer off the top of their head, by the way? Mike? 334. Perfect. Perfect. And what did you say, Paul? It is the Battle of Granicus. Yeah. Oh, how good. Everyone's onto it tonight. The goat and the ram battled it out in the Battle of Granicus in the year 334. That's when Alexander the Great first took on this empire. In fact, we're going to see it here, okay? So there's Alexander the Great looking pretty fierce and good in his battle armour, and he's taking on the Medo-Persian Empire. And Granicus is in modern-day Turkey. Is that correct? I think that's what I heard. Okay, so they're fighting each other, and unfortunately for the Medo-Persian king, it was a bit of a whitewash. Okay, you'd say it was a battle. It really wasn't. Alexander the Great, according to history and according to the scriptures, absolutely annihilated this army. Absolutely destroyed it. In fact, he took over more than 2,000 men as slaves just during the Battle of Granicus. It's a really fascinating battle, but what he did, he calculated all the terrain. You can see him going over this, this little river thing, and every move he made was calculated perfectly, so the enemy was always on the back foot. And the Medo-Persian Empire knew he was coming, but he somehow understood exactly what was going on, and it's an incredible battle. But that's the answer, 334 BC. So we need to lock that one in our minds, 334 BC. That's one of the little clues we've been given by Daniel, and of course 2,300 days, which equals years. As a side point, it's not saying the he-goat, killed the ram. It's saying he took away its power, because there's still Persians and by extension Medes in this world today. So it's not saying he annihilated the country, he took away its power by destroying its horn. And that is exactly what happened here at the Battle of Granicus. And there was about 5 or 6 battles after this, and it was a blood, he annihilated them every single time. But this is where things get a little bit supernatural, and the only word I can describe for this is awesome. Because this is one of the best prophecies in the whole of the Bible. And I was looking at prophecies that come from other religious groups, like you've got the Muslims, the Islamic faith, and their best prophecy was there's going to be a big aeroplane that's going to carry people around. Well, that's what they claimed the prophecy was about. That's the best prophecy they've got. This is one of the best prophecies in the whole Bible, and it makes perfect sense. And it's a little bit of a faith booster, this prophecy right here, and I want to talk about it. We've got the Battle of Granicus, the year 334 BC, and this is all to do with the vision of the ram. This is all to do with the goat and the ram butting heads for the first time. It's, if you think about it, Daniel 2, it's just the Nebuchadnezzar's image being described in a slightly different way. Battle of Granicus, 334 BC. And Daniel's wondering, how long is this vision going to go for? How long? How long will Jerusalem be unoccupied by the Jews? And God says for 2,300 years. How long until the sanctuary of the Jews of Jerusalem is restored to its people once again? Daniel wants to know, how long? How long until the place of the daily sacrifice, the temple in Jerusalem, is restored back to the Jews? How long? I don't know if we've been able to see it, brothers and sisters. God has given us a maths equation. There's a few in the Bible, there's about 3 or 4, but this here is a maths equation. The Battle of Granicus is, of course, the starting point, the goat and the ram. And God says the vision of the goat and the ram will go for 2,300 years. It's a maths question, and I'm going to call upon my maths friend, brother Zach Tudor. What is 334 BC plus 2,300 years, Zach? 1967. Spot on. In fact, you got my next slide. There we go. There's no such thing as year 0. And I think that is incredible, because God said it is going to happen in the year 1967 that the Jews will famously come back into the land of Jerusalem and take it. And of course we know right here, the 1967, the Six-Day War, that is exactly what happened. And I think that is absolutely amazing. You know, there was brothers and sisters in our faith prior to 1967 happening, and they read over and over and over the vision of the goat and the ram many, many times. And they came to the conclusion that 1967 was going to be the year. And of course, that is exactly what happened. How long will the vision of the goat and the ram happen for? 334 BC, all the way through to 1967. That's amazing. And for those who don't know much about the Six-Day War in 1967, we're going to do a very quick little crash course on it. There's a YouTube series, and it goes for about 3.5 hours. I would recommend watching it. It was really life-changing for myself. But this is the odds. Israel had taken control of Israel, not Jerusalem, and they needed to take that control of Jerusalem back. Why? Because God said they were going to get it. And this is not me saying how awesome war is. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying, look at how good God is. Okay, so if these were your odds, if this was your sport team coming up against this beast, you're not going to win. You're not going to win. In fact, people have claimed that the Six-Day War was the 1 in 100 war, because statistically, that is all the chances Israel had of winning. And they won. Egypt was boasting that there was a win before it happened. This is a quote from the Egyptian commander: "We are going to drive Israel into the sea." It's not Israel fighting the Arabs. It was Israel fighting the Arabs. Have a look at this next one here. It's not like you're fighting in a linear pattern. You're defending your borders for everything you've got. And God says you're going to do it, and you are going to take back your land, because it is the promised land of Abraham. Okay, so you've got 2,640 foot soldiers versing many, many more. Look at the tanks. Look at the firepower that these nations had. I mean, nothing obviously compared to God, but it's one of those amazing victories, 1967, and it's supernatural. There was things that happened in that war that are unbelievable, okay? So this is what the Moshe Dayan, Israel Defense Minister, said. He said, the only matter that concerns us is the defense of our borders. We shall not give up, nor shall we fail. And of course, that is a famous quote, and that was very much true. We've got this situation happening here. The Israeli forces got into the telecommunication systems of the Egyptians, and they got the Egyptians to line up all their tanks one by one in the middle of the night. And this Israeli commander said, "Hey guys, can you turn your lights on? We're just doing a drill here." And he pretended to be an Egyptian. And of course, the Egyptians said, "Yeah, okay." And they did. They lined up all their tanks on this one plain, and the Israeli forces, I don't know how many tanks there were, bombed the lot of them. Okay, it's just one of those freak accidents or freak situations that worked. Okay, there's many more stories you could talk about. This one here is the Israeli force going into the land. Okay, and what happened was the Israeli men looked like the Arabs. I think they even wore some of their uniforms, and they came in on their cars. And the young men who had their guns, waved and applauded as the Israeli forces came into the city. And the Bible says in a different passage, their hearts failed them for fear. And plenty of young men died when they finally realized, hey, this isn't people we know. This is the enemy, Israel. There was young men who had the Israeli forces at point-blank range who were unable to pull the trigger for fear. So much happened in this war. And of course, it is not Israel's war, it was God's war. Newspaper article, 1967, I believe this is still one of the most famous newspaper headlines of all time. Our bullets were going around corners. And that's what it felt like to be an Israel soldier. Every time they shot a bullet, it found the mark without question. And that's how amazing God is. So I'm not here saying war is fantastic and the Israelis did a great job. They didn't. They didn't at all. It was God's war, and God said, we are going to take back the capital of the world. The Arab countries' losses in the conflict were disastrous. Egypt's casualties numbered more than 11,000, with 6,000 from Jordan and 1,000 for Syria, compared with only 700 for Israel. They call it the 1 in 100 war because statistically that's the only likelihood Israel had of winning this battle. And they defeated 5 surrounding nations, and they tripled the area of controlled land, including the capital city of the world, Jerusalem. And ultimately this victory is attributed to God. And it all comes from this quote here, "I will bring you back into your land." And that, of course, is what happened. And we're still waiting for the spiritual part of Ezekiel 36, 37, Daniel 8 to be fulfilled. But right now, the physical is what we're working with. And it's quite an amazing prophecy, because the way Daniel 8:17 finishes when we're looking at the vision of the goat and the ram is that it's happening in the last days. Listen to this quote. Daniel 8:17, "So he came near where I stood, and when he came I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, 'Understand, Son of Man, that the vision refers to the time of the end.'" 1967, referring to the time of the end, which means if this is a football game, we're in overtime. We are 58 years over, which is fantastic, because that to us proves that we are literally in the final seconds of the world.